Well, what do we have here? But if it isn't my favorite snake oil salesman, one of my favorite ways to enjoy some unintentional comedy. Ha ha ha. Looks like I'm going to have a lot of fun today. I've been wanting to talk about a very curious and funny phenomenon for a while now. A kind of character who, when the moment of truth comes and it's time to prove how tough he really is, that guy ends up causing you the biggest secondhand embarrassment you can feel, and he makes you put your hands on your head. At the same time, you ask yourself, what the hell was the character thinking? That's how Black Clover is, Besto Shonen. That's how it is. Today I'm going to go over 3 of my favorite smoke bombs from the world of manga and anime. But first, very briefly, I'll explain what a vende humo is for those who aren't familiar with the term. When someone promises something they likely can't deliver, they're said to be selling you smoke. When someone shows you something that initially seems impressive but actually isn't that remarkable. The phrase selling smoke originates from the idea of selling something intangible or unreal, essentially deceiving the buyer. A practical example would be those impressive cinematic trailers for AAA video games that don't show anything at all about the game's gameplay or mechanics. It's just a cinematic trailer made in computer-generated imagery with epic music in the background, which feels more like a music video than a video game trailer. There have been many times when a company releases an impressive cinematic trailer only for the game to turn out to be, let's say, different. For example, take League of Legends and World of Warcraft. Anyone who watches their cinematic trailers would think the game is a graphical powerhouse, that it will make you go wild with excitement while playing it, only to later discover they're quite mediocre in that aspect. This is simple when applied to anime characters. We're all familiar with the character who was built up by the story to appear incredibly intimidating and powerful, only for them to be destroyed and humiliated in a ridiculous way for some reason. Although not all cases are like that, of course. Throughout the video, we'll examine 3 very distinct cases. Some sell you smoke with their power, while others do so, believing they'll have a greater impact on the plot than they actually do. Some pretended to be good or bad, only to reveal themselves as the opposite, deceiving you in the process. Alright, explanations are over, let's get on with the video. Supreme Kaiosama, as you can see, we're starting off strong right from the beginning. Supreme Kaiosama in all related matters, until it became evident that he literally soiled himself. I considered it one of the most disappointing and trolling moments by Akira Toriyama that I've ever seen in my life. In fact, the Supreme Kaiosamas were disappointing, except for the Southern Supreme Kaiosama. Not much is said about this guy, and I have to say he deserves the utmost respect. The guy had guts and fought like a beast. He fought admirably against Majin Buu, an impressive feat. But none of them compare in terms of cringe to what our current Supreme Kaiosama turned out to be. Shin, that's the guy's name, was introduced as an extremely fearsome person. He first appeared with Kirito, another guy who also turned out to be quite pathetic. Dabura instantly took him out in a horrible way, but I don't think viewers really cared that much about this pink guy's demise. So as soon as he appeared, Shin made Piccolo freak out completely, but in a really bad way. And of course, this really shocked you because Piccolo had never, ever freaked out in front of anyone before. Has he ever truly felt fear? Certainly, such as when facing the Saiyans Vegeta and Nappa, yet he never displayed it, always remaining calm and composed. Just like with Frieza and the androids, Piccolo never hesitated. But here, he nearly had to sprint to the Martian restroom to clean his pants, as he was honestly scared out of his wits. At that moment, everyone thought the Supreme Kai would be an unbeatable monster like Zeno, with a face that looks like he smokes weed thrice daily. Later on, it was explained that this was because Piccolo was fused with Kami, and he owed the highest respect to the Kai. Piccolo's reaction still seems exaggerated and out of place to me, despite other factors I'm uncertain about. Unless Piccolo also thought that the Supreme Kai's powers were much higher because of his rank. Both Kibito and Shin continue to hype themselves up, reminding me of that typical friend everyone has had. Who thinks he's Floyd Mayweather because he's been taking boxing classes at his local gym for a month and a half? Kibito was the first, casually inviting Gohan to transform into a Super Saiyan, as if it were a simple trick he wanted to see. When the reality is that if Babiti's cringe bald guys hadn't intervened, Gohan would have landed such a punch on Kibito. The latter would still be spinning around the solar system. It seems Popovich can do more than just hitting teenage girls. Apparently, he also knows how to spoil enjoyable moments. The Z-Warriors, on good terms with the duo, head to Babdi's base to defeat him. On the way, these two talk about how super strong they are. Like, how could Shin defeat Freezer with a single blow? That they're on another level and all that. Yeah, Kibito, sure. I'm sure if you'd paid attention, you would have beaten him. Yeah, sure. They arrive at the base and Shin starts freaking out. Babidi sends his best warriors, so Shin warns Goku and Vegeta to be very careful. They're elite warriors, super powerful, enhanced by Babidi's powers. If they're not careful, they could... No, never mind. They'd be taken out with a single blow. At this point, the Supreme Kai was already starting to realize that it might actually be true. Maybe those guys were just a little bit stronger than he originally thought. From this point, everything turns absurd. The Supreme Kaiosama gets pushed around by all. Goku threatens him to step away from the tournament ring. Vegeta yells at him harshly, and Shin almost soils himself from the fright. Only Gohan barely refrained from messing with him. Poor Shin, he's so small. Later, Majin Buu gives him a terrible beating, I remember that. Specifically, there's a scene where Majin Buu claps his hands in his face and leaves it in a really funny shape. I can't understand this unless it was an intentional prank. From this point on, the truth was revealed. The truth is that Shin is a weakling, or at least a weakling at this point in the story. And also, back then, he didn't have the courage to face Majin Buu to protect the universe, Shin. I don't dislike him. I actually find him very endearing, but there's no denying he was Dragon Ball's biggest letdown ever. Closely followed by good old Gohan, whose turn to be criticized will come soon enough. Don't be in a hurry. Number 2, Lid or Liev? I'm unsure. As stated in the video intro, characters can disappoint you in various ways. Hype isn't always about power. Sometimes, when revealed, it can turn out to be positive for the character. This applies to Leaf, the demon he carries within him. That little rascal. He pulled off the greatest roleplay in anime history, only matched by Megumin from Konosuba and her family. Why do I say that Leaf is a very simple roleplayer? The guy spent the whole series pretending to be the baddest of the bad. That he was a ruthless, super powerful, and fearsome demon who wanted to lead everyone down a path of destruction and pain. All that super sin stuff with demons and crazy people. He always appeared before others in a giant, highly threatening form. It was nothing to envy compared to Kurama before Naruto gave him kisses. Even when he appeared to that guy. To Zagred, he did it in an extremely aggressive and intimidating manner, taunting him that he lost due to his uselessness. He even laughed at him and rejoiced in his defeat. This is totally understandable. Once you see Leaf's past, you know how the other demons treated him in his world. But I can't help but point out the obvious. Throughout, he portrayed himself as a biblical figure who thrived on resentment and pain, craving destruction. And after all that, she ended up being the cutest and most adorable little creature that has ever existed, and will ever exist in all of Black Clover. Apologies for another Kurama comparison, but it's fitting here as it also highlights their differences more effectively. Even in 2021, some people still believe these two characters are identical. Kurama, despite his change in attitude, never roleplayed. He remained the most powerful Bijou after the Jubi's division. His power only brought him misfortune as people only wanted to exploit it for their own gain. He was just a mere tool and no one, ever, showed the slightest interest in how he might feel. Due to this, humans systematically mistreated him. Those who didn't use him wanted to kill or seal him, so he wouldn't cause problems for which he was never to blame. It didn't matter if it was done aggressively like Madara, or politely like Hashirama. Humans simply hurt him. On the other hand, Leaf put on quite a show. Because he only hates demons, in fact, he doesn't really have anything against humans themselves. Asta's mother, a human, took care of him and treated him very well for some time. Liv wants to take down the demons, yes, but all that showing up in a giant form, all that talk about darkness and everything, that was just Liv showing off. He's a low-ranking demon. The somewhat important demons don't even know him. He's like the demonic Asta, a nobody who became someone through hard work. Unlike Asta, Liv became edgier until Asta reasoned with him. With a couple of punches. Because if someone doesn't understand with words, they'll understand with punches. Remember that tip for daily life, it'll be useful. It's not just that Liv's massive form was a fake image that Liv deliberately created, but also her real form. Again, it's an Asta, but a bit edgier, just as small and everything. What's more, Inri has a chibi form, which is the height of cuteness. So, this is a complete show, one of Tabata's usual trolling plot twists. Nothing new here. It's great that Leaf is essentially a demon version of Asta. Besides, you could say they're brothers since they were raised by the same person. Come on, they even look alike physically. It's quite clear. The author is deliberately creating the impression that they're brothers. Who are we to oppose something so beautiful? I hope Juno doesn't get too jealous or have to share his stunning antler. I adore this entire cast. They're all amazing. All right, for all these reasons I've mentioned, I declare Leap as the most positive, sweetest, and nicest hype I've ever seen. Not everything was going to be negative in this video. Number 3, Minato Namikaze. I'm putting Minato on this list because he's one of the biggest hype machines for the Naruto community, due to his poor participation in the Fourth Great Ninja War. Minato was hyped up a lot throughout the entire manga, although I don't really think he was overhyped as such, because his feats were not exaggerated. What was said about him was true, unlike the Supreme Kaiosama, who was said to be super strong, and no, Minato was a real beast in combat and strategy on the battlefield. The problem fans have is that if he was so powerful, if he was so smart and skilled too, why did he have relatively so little impact during the war? Look, I think Minato actually did quite a lot during the war. Yes, I'm sure that someone so overpowered could have done a lot more. As if his basic abilities weren't enough. With infinite chakra from Edo Tensei and his half of Kurama, the guy had an immense chakra reserve. They later took it away from him, but he was still Minato. You have to understand that in this arc, there was an excess of important characters, and when I say excess, I mean excess. It was similar to the events at Marineford in One Piece. Fans have to accept that in these kinds of massive arcs, you can't give every character as much spotlight as we'd like. Unfortunately. In any case, rather than accusing Minato of being all talk, would you say that Kishimoto sold us on the idea of Minato's hypothetical involvement in the war? Because the character himself was insanely strong, and all his past feats were, right? So it wasn't the character's fault that he wasn't used to his full potential? Maybe Kishimoto shouldn't have hyped up a character so much if he was later going to be too lazy to take him to his full potential during the arc. Despite that, as I mentioned, I wasn't left feeling let down, thinking, what a squandered character, or what a con artist, you know? Minato, the fourth Hokage and Naruto's father, was an essential character that couldn't be ignored. Then you can take it however you want. You can think he was a fraud, a wasted character, overrated, or ultimately ignored by the author. What's obvious, and I won't deny it, is that his participation could have been better. And I guess he didn't quite meet the fans' expectations. For me, it was more than enough, given the complexity and issues that arose during this saga. I don't have much more to say about this case, but I definitely had to mention it. It's normal to be overshadowed when sharing screen time with Hiruzen God. I mean, Hiruzen God is Hiruzen God, right? You see your eye, you see your grandfather, you see your father, you see your lover, you see your everything? Hello, my little monsters. I recently discussed scammers in the anime industry in a previous video. Did you like it a lot? Well, that not so long ago was actually 3 months ago already. Damn it! You don't miss me. Being my community, it was to be expected that you guys would enjoy seeing blood. And I, since I'm a true agent of chaos, feel obligated to give my people what they ask for. So here's the sequel to the video about the biggest frauds in anime. If you're new and just found me through this video, don't worry. I'm going to explain what we consider a fraud in anime here. And also, you don't need to watch the first part since there we talked about 3 specific characters. And today we'll talk about 3 completely different ones. I suggest pausing this video and watching that one first, but don't worry, I'll still be here. I'll be chatting with your mom who invited me to watch some Netflix with her. Alright, skipping ahead a bit now to explain. For those of you who are already aware, I consider that a character is selling snake oil when they boast about having qualities that they actually don't have. These could be evil, goodness, power, skill, or anything else. The point is that the character ends up being something completely different from what they were trying to sell us or claim to be in the first place. That's where the term smoke seller comes from, because they're not really selling you anything. It was all just a facade or even a straight-up lie. This is one of my favorite ways to create unintentional comedy, as the character usually ends up looking foolish to others. Both fans and other characters in their work see them this way. I mentioned my favorite example earlier, and it was about the Supreme Kaiosama, a character who was presented as the greatest thing since sliced bread. A supreme and all-powerful being, capable of defeating Freezer effortlessly. He was a true god that everyone feared. And well, right, he was horribly owned along with his partner, Kibito, in a pathetic way, showing that all that previous show about being all-powerful and such was out of place. Well, I think that's clear, so let's move on to 3 more frauds in the anime world because today we've got a lot to cover. Number 1. Bellamy. This guy is a complete walking meme, and that's exactly why this isn't the first time Bellamy has appeared in one of my themed videos. Let's call him not very honorable. He had his appearance in the video about the most terrifying beatdowns in anime, where he showed up Well, for being horribly beaten up by Luffy. Shortly before the Skypiea arc. Sorry, I didn't sleep much last night. That's why I said Skypiea is boring, but I would never actually say that. Is it bearable if you play it at 3 times speed? At 4 times speed, it's better. Surprisingly, Bellamy is more of a fraud than a punching bag. The first time this guy was a fraud was during his mini-arc. We knew Bellamy was likely too much of a charlatan. My theory, while all these events were happening, was that even though Luffy and presumably Zoro were stronger than Bellamy, I assumed that Bellamy wasn't too far off on the power scale. In other words, I thought if Luffy and Bellamy fought, Rubberman wouldn't have it easy, similar to their fight against Dika Moria, or perhaps a supernova or something similar. But I was really surprised when, after lines and lines, and even more lines of dialogue and tons of text from Bellamy bragging about how powerful, dangerous, and crazy he was, both in the bar scene and when Luffy came to punch him. Because seriously, this guy just wouldn't shut up, not even underwater. Doflamingo had to come and put him in his place so he'd shut up for 5 minutes. Everything ended with a simple punch. Look, I assume Luffy was extremely pissed off, while Bellamy wasn't taking all the precautions against Luffy, trying to show off in front of his crew, and that's why he took a direct hit that knocked him out. I'm not saying that Bellamy was stronger than Luffy. What I mean is that, under different circumstances, maybe Bellamy would have taken 2 or 3 hits instead of just 1. Although on second thought, it's likely that all of Bellamy's bounty was because he committed crimes against defenseless people. So don't focus on me too much, okay? Even with his bounty, this guy is just bluffing. Does a high bounty mean someone is dangerous to the public or to the world government? But since it has nothing to do with power, really, you can never know if a bounty is because of feats of strength or just simple misdeeds. In Dressrosa, I believe Bellamy wasn't bluffing much, though it appeared he would be rather important or accomplish something noteworthy. Aside from being used by Doflamingo as a simple puppet while Bellamy cries like a baby, look, I don't dislike the Dressrosa Bellamy. But all that about him going to Skypiea and now being stronger and that he regained his hope, for him to end up being treated so badly, well, I find it a bit funny. What do you want me to say? Honestly, yes, if we stop to analyze it. After Luffy's punch, Bellamy's whole life went down the drain. Absolute crap. His whole crew even died. But hey, at least he got his hopes and dreams back. I guess it was worth it, right? Number 2, Gohan. Just as I promised in the previous video, for this second edition of the biggest frauds in anime, we have our dear Gohan, you know? Lately, fans of this character have been getting really offended if you call him a fraud, since, according to them, Gohan has never been a fraud. That sometimes he's been very powerful, that he's had a tough life, that we're just haters, and I don't know what else. The issue is that they believe we call Gohan a fraud solely due to the power matter. It demonstrates that they have not considered the arguments of those who believe Gohan is somewhat of a loudmouth. At least in my case, the main reason why I think Gohan is a professional fraud is because of his suspicious behavior. He adapts his attitude and personality to fit the situation. Allow me to elaborate. In every case, when Gohan is clearly superior to his opponent, and I emphasize, he has to be clearly superior. Because if he's only slightly superior, like in the Cell tournament before moving on to Phase 2, it doesn't count, right? An attitude that even the most orthodox Saiyan would be proud of. The 2 most famous moments are in his fight against Perfect Cell, once he reached Phase 2, and against Super Buu, when Gohan reached the Mystic State. In both cases, Gohan adopted an egotistical, cocky, foolish, and potentially dangerous attitude for himself and others. Against Cell, Gohan refused to finish him off and ignored his father's pleas. No, that father. Not the other one with the spiky hair. Yes. That Goku may be many things, but if there's one thing he has, it's experience on the battlefield. And this was in Z before his mental downgrade in Super. So Goku knew it was very dangerous to let such an abominable and unpredictable enemy like Cell have so much time to think of a strategy. Gohan turned a deaf ear and told his father that he wanted to have a little more fun with Cell. But literally 10 minutes ago he was whining, saying, "Oh, I'm not like my father. Fighting isn't my thing, unlike my dad or Mr. Vegeta, who are Saiyans. And because you weren't tough, your father died and you were about to be brutally analyzed by Cell. Super perfect. But without a doubt, against Super Buu, it was a much worse case. When he achieved the Mystic State, as always, Gohan let the power go to his head. Wow, what a thing. So, when he arrived on the battlefield and faced Buu, the monster, he asked him, 'Do you want to fight Majin Buu?' Buu spoke in the third person. Gohan replied, 'Fight? With you, no. I'm going to kill you! So, Hotshot, you want to fight Majin Buu? Why, for God's sake, Gohan, weren't you supposed to be peaceful and just wanted to study or something like that? And here you could say, didn't Super Buu kill his mother? Blah, blah. All right, I would buy that from you then, if Gohan were angry, pissed off? But the thing is, no, Gohan didn't look angry. Or at least not that angry. He was super cocky, like a high school bully. And once again, as always, he gave his rival space to think of a strategy and beat him horribly. And again, Gohan's attitude changed. Once he was overpowered, even his damn look changed once Super Buu with Gotenks absorbed landed a couple of punches on him. It's impressive. At least Vegeta or Goku keep their pride, even when they're being horribly beaten like Super Vegeta against Cell. Vegeta didn't panic for even a second. Unlike Gohan, who even tried to hide behind a rock so Majin Buu wouldn't beat him. Come on, please. And I know now you'll come at me with the, no, it's because he's half human, half Saiyan. The cells activate and deactivate. That's why the personality changes. Okay, I get it. And a question. Trunks, that guy never made a fool of himself like that, and he faced whoever he had to, whether they were stronger or weaker than him. Mirai Trunks never acted cocky. That's because he's the best character in the franchise. Nothing we can do about it. I also want to make a small note because people like to make things more complicated than they are. Don't attribute false quotes to others. I'm stating this clearly. Future Gohan doesn't count here. Future Gohan is not a fraud, and I don't consider him the same character as present Gohan. I'm sorry, I know they should be considered the same character, but it's like asking me to treat Mirai Trunks and Trunks as the same person. Kid from Z and Super. I just can't. Even if you tell me the only difference between them is the life they've had, I can't compare them at all. If you want to do it, fine. I'll just say that in that alternate universe, Gohan changed his attitude and let himself stop messing around. In conclusion, Gohan isn't a fraud simply because he lacks strength. In reality, he's quite talented when he wants to be and has received many power-ups. He's a fraud due to his attitude, for pretending to be the toughest and best when he can. But he makes excuses when he's outmatched. Gohan, do us a favor and clear things up. Either you're a show-off or you're a peaceful nerd, but you can't be both. Dude, make up your mind. Number 3. Sikorsky. Oh man, good old Sikorsky. Goal, the biggest cringe lord of all here. Closely followed by Ali Jr. Yanagi could also fit in this spot since both he and Sikorsky were the biggest frauds in the entire saga of the escaped convicts. They may not have been the weakest, as Doyle was likely the weakest, though I'm uncertain. We'd need to carefully analyze it to be sure. The point is that these two, but especially Sikorsky, and that's who I want to focus on today, were extremely embarrassing. But at least Yanagi poisoned Baki and almost took him out. Sikorsky, on the other hand, has no excuse at all. The first issue arises with his introduction. The typical over-the-top intro meant to hype up a character. Why do I say it's over the top? It's very simple because it turns out it was a blatant lie. You could almost say it was staged. Look, the guy was in some kind of prison, or pit, or weird hole, and he had to train his finger strength to the limit in order to escape. I don't have a problem with that, considering the feats in this same series. Like the damn Dorian swimming across the sea. As if he were just swimming in his local pool, or Doyle surviving an electric chair execution. As if it were just a damn laser hair removal session, so it's not that impressive either. But anyway, they make it seem like, oh, he's crazy. God, what madness? Sikorsky not up to this point. And well, whatever. Nobody was going to be surprised. But then came the moment when it was mentioned that Sikorsky went straight to attack Andrianov Zargon once he escaped from that pit. Andrianov is that Russian guy who was pretty important during the Underground Arena arc and who fought against Jack in the quarterfinals. This guy Zargon was known all over Mother Russia as a real beast. Sikorsky, acting cocky as usual, attacks Zargon. He says, quote-unquote, he defeats him. Why, quote-unquote? Well, because it's explained later that Zargon was still injured from his fight against Jack. That fight was so brutal and fierce that this man still hadn't fully recovered, not even close. So yes, Sikorsky beat a wounded man nearly to death, someone who couldn't defend himself. This isn't properly explained at the time, and that's why it makes me so mad that Sikorsky takes credit for it. defeating Zargon O, also known as Alexander Galen in the dub, which I know some of you know him by that name. After this, it was obvious that everything would get worse. Sikorsky spends the whole saga wandering around Tokyo like a complete idiot, getting beaten up by several characters, including the little Gaia. The most pathetic moment for this guy was when he tried to attack Yujiro Hama himself. That guy should literally kiss the big guy Biscuit Oliva's ass because he basically saved his skin. It goes without saying that Oliva could have crushed him so badly that right now, Sikorsky would easily be a welcome mat. We already know this character's lowest point, poetically speaking. Jack Hama, the man who once fought Andrianov Zargon in the underground arena, is the one in charge of finally putting Sikorsky in his place. Jack takes him precisely to the place where he fought Zargon a long time ago and pulverizes him. No, that wasn't a fight, it was a complete massacre. Massacre like an adult man fighting against a child. But the humiliation doesn't end there. But Jack passes the baton to Gaia, a super soldier who, now that I think about it, also made empty promises back in the day. But anyway, that's beside the point, and at least I like Gaia. This soldier gives Sikorsky a brutal beating using dirty combat tricks, giving Sikorsky a taste of his own medicine. And yes, this baby-faced man was the one who made Sikorsky taste defeat. After this, Sikorsky, rather than retiring and, say, baking cakes, he goes crazy and starts looking for Baki, later teaming up with Yanagi and looking really worn out. In the end, both of them were completely crushed by Baki. Powered up by sex, the best power-up in anime history? I have no proof, but I have no doubts either. In conclusion, Sikorsky was not only a fraud, but also an opportunistic, egocentric, unbearable character with no awareness of his own limitations. And ultimately a guy who's just unlikable, and I really doubt he has any fans or defenders. Screw you. Sikorsky, you don't seem Russian at all. Jack the Canadian looks more Russian than you. You can't even do that right, you piece of crap. I'm going to YouTube to watch Jack beat you up for the 25th time. We're back with one of my favorite series in my entire YouTube career, which I think is also a favorite for many others.
As well. Oh.
Yes, I'm talking about our beloved, adorable, funny, and above all, peed-on Bendahumos. This time with edition number 3 with more smoke than ever. I can't believe it's been so long since I made a video for this section. Well, although there was also the spin-off of the anti-Bendahumos. I think that precisely made up for the lack a little bit. Alright, let's keep it simple and not waste too much time for those who weren't here in previous editions and don't know the concept of a Bendahumos. According to Google, the most accurate description of this term would be something like this. A person who claims or pretends to have influence or favor with someone powerful in order to sell their favor to those seeking it. To put it in simple terms and applied to anime characters, these would be all those characters who sold themselves as fearsome types. Keep in mind, either because of their strength, their intelligence, or anything along those lines, acting like they're a big deal, as if they were the last Coke in the desert, only to turn out to be the complete opposite, or at the very least, not live up to expectations. This can be negative, of course, or it can even be positive for a character, as we've seen in previous editions. But if you want it even more summarized, they're just the same old fakes we've always had. Snake oil salesmen are one of my favorite comedy tropes in fiction, whether intentional or not. So, without anything else to add, let's get to today's fakes. Number 1, Gaia, the ultimate soldier, a perfect assassin capable of killing you 7 times before you hit the ground. A being so dangerous that it lives contained in the body of a mediocre soldier. A man who has broken all his limiters, who understands his own physiology so well, who is able to manipulate the hormonal environment of his body at will. Rumor has it that he is even capable of facing the almighty one-on-one. Yujiro Han defeated a 13-year-old boy, and then Yujiro used him as a rag to clean the floor. I don't dislike Kaya. In fact, I have a special fondness for him, because of the humiliating beating he gave to that idiot Sikorsky. But he has been one of the most infamous cases of exaggerating a character's abilities that Itagaki has ever had. Which is really saying something. It was explicitly stated in the series that it was believed Gaia could go toe-to-toe with freaking Yujiro Hanma, which was, and still is, ridiculous. A 13-year-old Baki defeated the soldier by controlling his endorphins, proving the soldier was not a real threat to the ogre. I ended up believing it myself. The series was just getting started. And well, if the work itself is telling you something, it's normal to take it literally. After all, why would there be a need to lie to the viewer so blatantly? Obviously, once Baki defeated him, I knew this little man wasn't all that good and honest. He was left completely defeated by Yujiro. I mean, isn't it humiliating to lose to Yujiro? The guy is virtually invincible in his world. What was really ridiculous was suggesting that that little guy Gaia had even the slightest chance. As I mentioned, I don't want to criticize Gaia because I like him, and he doesn't seem like a bad person to me. But damn it, Agaki, it's so cringe when you hype up a character to ridiculous extremes. It turns out he's not even close to being up to the task. Yeah, that insufferable jerk is just terrible. They may be powerful on the battlefield, but not in martial arts. They don't understand. Are you a fan of Black Clover and My Hero Academia? But I can understand that Gaia's strength is stealth and assassination. But then why did he go to a damn rooftop to fight Yujiro? If he was supposedly putting himself at a terrible disadvantage, why the hell didn't he meet Yujiro in a forest with traps or something like that? It's the author himself who tried to make us believe that these two could have a fair fight. It's not my fault. Anyway, look, I have number 2, Mahou. As we know, UP is the apparent kind-hearted reincarnation of the universal entity known as Majin Buu. This character became relevant, well, if you can even call that relevance, let's just say he did. Something in the spin-off Dragon Ball Grand Tour. Can we call Grand Tour a spin-off nowadays? Can't we? I'm not sure. On the other hand, Maju is the name that was given to UP once he combined his powers with Meijin. Fat Buu, theoretically creating a very overpowered version of Super Buu from Z. They're not exactly the same, but they follow the same principle. Now then, why is UP here? The truth is, I personally like this character a lot. And more than just hyping him up, I think he was horribly wasted. You'll probably see this character again if I ever talk about this same topic, that is, wasted characters. But, so to speak, there was some hype about the possible relevance that you could have had. After all, he is the reincarnation of the last Dragon Ball Z villain and Goku's disciple, trained by him. Moreover, he fused with Majin Buu Watan, creating a seemingly powerful beast, or did he? Look, Mahou is very strong, but Toei Animation, who were in charge of Dragon Ball Grand Tour, decided to waste him horribly and sell a bunch of hype with him. So much reincarnation, so much transformation, so much absorption. I don't know what, I don't know how many. Emotional moment here, emotional moment there. His fight against baby Vegeta lasted only a few minutes. The worst part is that Mahoup felt nearly equal to this baby Vegeta, sometimes even seeming more powerful. This doesn't even consider Up's super powerful magic techniques, like the chocolate beam, which can almost instantly kill you, just like Up did to those unfortunate humans. By the way, I must have a really dark sense of humor, but damn, Up, did you go too far blasting them with that chocolate beam without thinking about the consequences? Nah, but could Ben turn them back? Damn jerk. Yeah, I get it, man. It was a joke. Like I was saying, the fight was really short. We didn't get to see Mahoup's real abilities, and yeah, it even felt like filler. So much importance was given to this character just for him to end up losing in such a short time. Very little time, by the way. He was only there to buy a little time, and so Goku could arrive to save the day. I don't even understand why they brought him out. It's true that he later started trolling Baby from the inside, which is the only relevant thing the character does. So I hope you find that enough. Strangely, from this saga onward, Mahou, the warrior who could challenge baby Vegeta in his third transformation, is portrayed as equal to Goten, Trunks, and Vegeta, in base form against Super C-17. I'm not saying Mahou had to beat him, but seriously, Mahou couldn't do even a little bit more than the rest. Mahou had impressive potential, but it's a shame since he's theoretically dozens of times stronger than Goku in Phase 3. But Toei wanted to make the story as damn mediocre as they could, and this was the result. Yes, the Baby Saga was good, but let's not get carried away. It had a lot of flaws and problems. We shouldn't let nostalgia blind us. Let's not even mention Mahou losing to Baby, being turned into chocolate by his own beam. Because look, that's all. You just need to watch the scene to feel the urge to sigh deeply. Mahou, unfortunately, through no fault of his own. He's very powerful, very interesting, and quite charismatic, but he ended up looking like a fraud because of Toei Animation. Number 3, Bubblegum Guardians. Hey, wait, rewind. Guardians of what? Wasn't this a video about anime? Well, yes, it was. The other day, I watched a 3-hour Adventure Time lore video on stream. It reminded me of one of the biggest scammers I've ever known. I wanted to expose them in this video. Giant robots created by Princess Bonneville serve as her guardians, protecting the kingdom. candy or gum, depending on the dub. The issue is that these guys do anything but protect. I noticed that they've literally been giant punching bags. They've never defeated an enemy or a threat inside the kingdom. Counter with the Collar and Susana Salvaje are examples of characters who have destroyed these guardians. I understand they're just well-crafted creations, nothing extraordinary, but they're supposed to be lethal weapons of destruction as giant combat robots. However, they never fulfill their intended purpose. In fact, they're so useless that the time they were most relevant was when one of them got corrupted near the end of the series and started wreaking havoc, turned into some kind of demon. Given Adventure Time's style, this could be an intentional inside joke or a deliberate bait and switch, similar to what's done in One Punch Man. Since it's not fully clear to me, I'd rather put them here. Besides, they're really not very charismatic compared to other troops in the kingdom, like the friendly Banana Guards, for example, or the Samurai Robot. I can't recall his name, but he was quite badass and even a bit edgy. He seemed like a parody of anime characters. Not much else to say about them. Maybe not many people will agree with me in calling them hype men, but when I was a kid, I always expected a lot from these guys. They seemed very imposing to me and made me feel a lot of respect. But that respect faded over time, and what it was basically turned into secondhand embarrassment. One of them getting corrupted and causing trouble was the icing on the cake. Bubblegum Guardians, the biggest frauds in Adventure Time in my personal opinion, yes. Another video about frauds in anime. I've developed an addiction that I can't control. I have a problem, but I didn't choose to be like this. Please don't judge me. It may appear that I lack ideas, but that's not true. I'm making a video about One Punch Man. 2 about Shimatsu, 1 about Adan, 1 about Zero Fuku vs. Buddha, 1 about Dragon Ball Super, and 1 about Rock Lee and Maito Guy. But the fun I have making videos about these kinds of characters is just indescribable. And I think it ends up reflecting positively in the content. Since this is part 4, let's discuss snake oil salesmen without wasting time. Characters who claimed to be a certain way or boasted about having this or that ability, but then turned out to be the complete opposite and ended up embarrassed and humiliated on the ground. As we'll see later in the video, this can clearly be negative for the character. It left him looking like a boastful clown who only knew how to talk and pretend. But surprisingly, it can also be good for the character. Nice and easy, let's get to it. Number 1, Amanai Yu. I think at this point, it's impossible to make a video in this section without a character from Dragon Ball or from it showing up. Don't you put goats in the man beach? Animated. In this case, I wanted to give Dragon Ball a break, although don't think they've gotten away with it. Yes, Dara, I'm looking at you. Snake oil salesman, gullible? What happened with Amanai Yu was terrible, a character that made no sense at all. And the only logical reason I can think of for his existence is that Itagaki was super high the day he decided to include him in the story. Where could I even start? First of all, as always, this character came completely out of nowhere. We had never ever heard that there was a guy out there with such characteristics that even Yujiro Hama himself would be interested in him. The ogre had never ever shown the slightest bit of respect for an opponent until that moment. The peak of madness came when this Amanai guy, whose name I had to look up on the wiki because I couldn't remember, gave Yujiro a tremendous slap, and Yujiro did nothing in response. What? I'm never going to understand this scene or the way Yujiro acted. Why the hell did he let himself be tamed by someone as weak, pathetic, and cringe as Amanai Yu? It's totally incomprehensible. Even worse, especially considering this was one of the times when Yujiro showed his most wild and aggressive behavior. After this happened, there were no doubts. Amanai appeared extremely strong to every viewer, and he was one of my favorites in the tournament. A protege of Yujiro, who even lets him slap him in public. You'd have to be crazy not to believe that Amanai must have tremendous abilities. Well, almost, but not quite. If I recall, he easily defeated Baki's generic fighter number 536 without much effort. And that's where we got to see his fighting style. Of levitation? I don't know. That was really ugly and it gave me chills. What a cringe fighting technique. I wanted to die from secondhand embarrassment. Then came the fight against the god of war, the man-eater, the tiger killer. After Orochi, for God's sake, what epic titles this man has, right? Well-deserved if you ask me, not much more to say about it. Doppo hit Manai so hard with his thing that he even changed his zodiac sign, leaving Manai looking like a complete fraud. He'd be lucky to make it into the top 12, as he wasn't close to being one of the strongest fighters in the tournament. Although I doubt it, rivals like Andrano Zargon were hundreds of times more powerful and difficult to handle than this one. Hopeless cringe lord. A complete waste of time, embodied in a character whose design is forgettable and mediocre. Everything ended for this fool with a blow from Yujiro to the trapezius area. I don't know if it killed him, left him in a coma, or didn't do anything serious. I don't know, because I think this guy never showed up again. As far as I remember, you never see this loser again. Did he show up again? Just imagine how irrelevant he is, I can't even remember. I wish I knew what the hell Yujiro was thinking to even consider that this guy would be a revelation in the tournament. Or maybe the ogre thought the level of the tournament was going to be way lower than he expected. Amanai either fooled everyone, including Yujiro, with empty words, or the ogre was totally drunk on sake. Because seriously, Amanai, you, please don't ever show up in Baki again, I'm begging you. King, a notable aspect of One Punch Man, is the series' large cast of characters, which is well known among fans. Frauds are essential to One Punch Man's comedy, as it relies on characters who pretend to be important. Saitama wipes them off the map with a single punch moments later, or they get humiliated. Top-tier heroes such as Atomic Samurai and the goddess Tatsumaki. One Punch Man wouldn't be the same without Genos blowing himself up every few episodes. He's the biggest show-off in the story, and there's a lot of competition. The undisputed, absolute king, and I mean that literally, is good old King. Because we all know that when someone gets tough. In Jane Into the River, King is a delightful and endearing character that is impossible not to adore. He's not just a great guy with a huge heart and a lot of courage, as he showed when he met Tadeo underground and took him by the hand to rescue him from that hole. But also, he's worth millions as a friend. Being the only character in the story who truly managed to help Saitama with his advice, empathizing a lot with the invincible bald guy, King is the only person with whom Saitama has really felt comfortable talking about these topics. Both know each other's secrets, and why not say it? They probably consider each other best friends. Hey, but and Genos? What? Genos? He's more like Saitama King's student, or little brother. More like a close friend in the usual sense. They play video games together, share hobbies and interests, and talk about delicate and personal matters together. Saitama consistently helps, advises, and empathizes with others, but King has seldom reciprocated with Saitama. And I'm sure the bald guy with a cape really appreciates this hero. The reason he's a fraud isn't much of a mystery. Despite being an ordinary human, King is widely regarded as one of the most powerful heroes in the world, alongside Blast. He had the bad or good luck, depending on how you look at it, that a lot of feats were attributed to him that were actually done by Saitama. King is basically a comic character, but that doesn't take away from him being an excellent character. Also in everything else, except for power, obviously. Oh, no, sorry. King Engine and Pal River, I almost forgot. This Giga Chad King starred in one of the most hilarious moments of the story. That was when he stood up to all the damn executives of the Monster Association. And they thought King was so strong that any nonsense King said just for the sake of saying it, they took it as a threat, a provocation, or anything like that from King. He's a showman, but for the right reasons. And personally, I find him very likable. Unlike that weirdo from the previous position, whose name I've already forgotten again. I hope nothing bad ever happens to this man. Luckily, I don't think it will. And that we can see him at the end of the manga playing a little game with his good friend Saitama. Number 3, Sasuke Uchiha. My dear Sasuke, what am I going to do with you? He's a character I really like and have even made videos defending in the past, while he exhibited extremely cringeworthy behavior in Shippuden. Upon reflection, his actions were fairly justified in certain situations, even if he acted like a complete idiot. I don't support or agree with his actions, but well, after enduring immense pain and numerous lies, Sasuke's mental state deteriorated, leading to impulsive and bizarre decisions. But that's not the topic of this video. Why is he a fraud? Sasuke's arc in Shippuden is the main reason. Let me explain what I consider his arc to be in the series, or rather the beginning of his true adventure. It would be from the moment he defeats Orochimaru, until Itachi with the Edo Tensei leaves forever. Not without first making us all cry like babies with hydrocephalus, with those legendary words, "No matter what happens, Sasuke, I will always love you." What happened here is that while it's true and obvious that Sasuke was very strong, a lot of things happened. A lot of plot conveniences and millions of factors that led the viewers and even Sasuke himself to think he was the coolest guy in the room. That he was the last Coke in the desert and the guy with the biggest ego, until he ran into a certain rapper and his 8-tailed pet. First things first, all the titles Sasuke claimed during his journey are worth almost nothing. Being the one who took down the fearsome Orochimaru, the explosive Hidara, or the invincible Itachi. When you stop to analyze them carefully, it turns out they're worth nothing. When Sasuke defeated Orochimaru, he likely took down the weakest, sickest, and most debilitated version of the villain. An Orochimaru who could barely get out of bed, who was literally dying. And to make matters worse, he couldn't even use his hands properly to perform jutsu. On top of all that, Sasuke attacked him by surprise, not giving the Sennin a chance to defend himself. Sasuke finished off Orochimaru, but Orochimaru was no real threat at that point. Sasuke took all the credit for being a badass and started his journey. Then came the fight against Deidara. Well, what can I say? Many YouTubers and content creators have previously discussed the extremely implausible and absurd resolution of this fight. With Sasuke having all the power the plot could give him on his side, pulling Sharingan abilities out of nowhere, moving at the speed of light, dodging unavoidable attacks, and other nonsense like that. During his journey, Sasuke was only able to win one fight. If the opponent was dying, if he had more plot armor than Joseph, Joestar, Kirito, and Luffy combined, or if the opponent just let him win. And now that I mentioned letting him win, yes. Itachi Sasuke also took the credit for defeating Itachi when, well, we all know what would have happened if Itachi had gone all out during the fight. It's worth noting that Itachi was dying of tuberculosis at this point, according to my recollection and sources, if accurate. Sasuke was convinced by all of this. It was understandable. If I had taken down a Sannin, an Akatsuki, and even Itachi Uchiha himself, I would believe it too. Then Danzo, who suddenly forgot how to fight and only knew how to revive himself with Izanagi. But this has already ended. Sasuke and his team suffered a humiliating defeat when they encountered the charismatic Killer Bee. That he almost made him crap his pants. This is what happens, Sasuke, when all your victories have an asterisk, when all the fights had certain special conditions. Until you came up against a guy who doesn't give a damn about anything with his huge eighth tail. Your plot armor, Sasuke, I love you, but you hyped yourself up a lot during your journey. It's okay. Hint taken. I've completely confirmed that it's not just me who finds hype men, characters funny and hilarious, but it turns out you all also find them very comical. Since I've seen a lot of support for this so-called series about the biggest hype men in anime, I came up with a sort of spin-off for this section. I've come up with 2 ideas, but I'll only reveal one for now. We're already familiar with what a hype man character is, but what happens when it's completely the opposite? What happens when a character seemed pretty weak or irrelevant to the plot? Were they completely sidelined? And no one would have thought for a second that this character was going to accomplish some of the most incredible feats in their story. What do we call this type of character? They could be characters we thought were weak and then turned out to be strong, just like that, but it's not exactly the same. For example, Whis from Dragon Ball Super, up until near the end of the movie, Battle of Gods, or in the anime's retcon. You couldn't know that, in fact, he was much more powerful than the God of Destruction. Beerus? But you could suspect it, or at least you could suspect that he was some kind of supreme sorcerer, or at the very least. He was crucial in all divine matters, serving as the assistant to the God of Destruction. But the characters we're going to talk about today could even have been the butt of jokes by their own creators and fandoms. But they ended up proving us all wrong, in a way that can only be described as epic. That's why today we're going to mention and talk about some of the most anti-hype characters. I'm not sure what to call them. If you have any name suggestions from anime, let me know in the comments. So let's get to it. Number 1. Shibukawa. Mr. Shibukawa is literally an oasis within Baki. This badass old man is an oasis in a desert of smoke. Master Itagaki is, for obvious reasons, one of my favorite authors, but like everyone else, he has his, let's say, peculiarities. Itagaki has a terrible and annoying habit of exaggerating indiscriminately and unjustifiably hyping up every single new character that appears on screen. It's already reached the point where fans just sigh deeply and roll our eyes every time a new character is introduced. As usual, they're treated like the ultimate prize and the most powerful, formidable person in existence, only for them to end up brutally beaten by some other character or by the ogre 5 minutes later. And we know perfectly well that 9 times out of 10, when someone is introduced as an unbeatable monster, it's just smoke and mirrors. To give a simple example, we have the ultimate super soldier Gaia and his infamous overrated hype that he had in his saga. They claimed that this guy could even defeat Yujiro Hama, the legendary Yujiro Hama, Obviously, Yujiro didn't even have to try. He didn't even need to warm up or get his blood flowing. It was just pathetic. Will this man appear in future editions of The Worst Scammers? Of course he will. The thing is, Old Man Shibukawa is, if not the only one, almost the only character that Itagaki didn't exaggerate in an absurd way. And it turned out that he was not only powerful, but also able to counter monsters like Biscuit, Oliva, among others. In addition to having the impressive and fearsome achievement of being one of the few characters who were able to take down the Tiger Slayer, the God of War, Orochi Doppo. This happened during the quarterfinals in the Underground Arena tournament. While it was evident that Shibukawa wasn't an ordinary person, this character maintained an air of mystery throughout the tournament. He was never hyped up that much by the story. Unlike what happened with guys like the useless Cringe Lord, the extreme one that Yujiro brought to the tournament for some reason. The one who was brutally analyzed by Doppo later on? I don't even know if I remember his name. Or even with Katsumi, who, although he's a beast and a character I really like. In that tournament, there were a lot of fighters who were on a higher level than him. Even Hanayama, although he lost to him. I'll always feel that he appeared superior, and only lost because it was his turn to do so. The punches Katsumi endured were serious. Shibukawa reached the tournament semifinals where the competition was fierce. Characters like Andrianov, Zargon, and Hanayama weren't in the top 7. He was defeated by the antagonist. In quotes from this arc, Jack logically wasn't going to win the final. It had to be between Baki and his brother. I'm not saying that Shibukawa was stronger, it's just that the fight was scripted, so to speak. Although, yes. At this point, he was an unstoppable monster, surpassing the impressive judo and jujutsu. Don't underestimate Shibukawa, but without a doubt, it's an impressive feat to end up in the same position, so to speak, as Retsukai. And just before entering the final of this tournament, Shibukawa has demonstrated his strength on other occasions. Like when he defeated Ali Jr., he's an incredibly strong and formidable character. Also, he's one of the least overhyped by the author in the series. Grandpa Shibukawa is a great guy and one of my favorite characters in Baki. He's a legend. Number 2, Magna, because a real man never speaks badly of Magna, the ultimate friend. Today, more than ever, it's time to bring up one of my favorite members of the Black Bulls. And why not say it of all Black Clover Magna Swing? Warning, the following contains significant spoilers about a manga character's current state. Read cautiously. Honestly, I don't think anyone was shocked. After the anime ended, not reading the manga and waiting for Piero to continue would be a huge mistake. Magna's storyline in the manga was completely unexpected. I always had faith that Magna and Zora would do something important in the arc. Logically, everyone was being useful and these two still hadn't participated actively. And since Tabata is known for not completely abandoning and forgetting secondary characters, I knew he would make the effort to include Magna. Somehow, what I couldn't expect was that this son of a truck full of whores would get so damn lucky against the guy who seemed to be the toughest of the trio of villains, the main one of the arc. And what I liked most about all this is that instead of, well, giving the character a stupid power-up to make him absurdly strong, this allowed him to remain within the power scale and continue fighting. They gave him different abilities that didn't make him more powerful, but they do help him stand up against opponents who completely outmatch him in power. Because, as it's often said, if you can't beat your enemy, then just nerf them. Besides, well, we know that Dante is a guy who, in a way, represents ego at its highest expression. Magna was greatly underestimated for being a commoner with little magical aptitude. Not knowing how to react once he started gaining ground on him took its toll. There are a number of people who complain about this a lot since Magna is a guy without demons or spirits inside him. Facing and epically defeating a guy like Dante? Well, guys, simply put, this isn't Dragon Ball. The one who throws the biggest ki blast or has the most shapes and exotic colors in their eyes doesn't win. It's not like Naruto. In Black Clover, you can win with tactics, surprise, countering, or a combination of all three, as seen in this case. Saying that Magna's victory was wrong is simply not understanding how this work functions. The point is that Magna fits perfectly in this video since almost no one expected much from him. Those of us who expected a lot knew about the character's potential and greatness. We also didn't expect him to take down that damn Dante. So, of course, Magna is absolutely the opposite of a fraud. I thought that maybe, I don't know, he would be a good support at some point. He might make an epic save or an emotional sacrifice, but definitely not this. Let's not even discuss how epic it was. It's impossible to not get up from your chair when you see Magna's panel as he lets out his victory shout, like a real wild animal, completely covered in wounds and standing tall in front of a totally defeated Dante. Tabata's treatment of supporting characters is truly commendable. It's greatly appreciated, isn't it? Toriyama and Kishimoto, yes, I'm looking at you two. Did your works have more than 5 characters? Sons of bitches. Number 3, Muten Roshi. In Dragon Ball, characters are rarely overhyped. One notable exception was the infamous Kaiosama, whose abilities were exaggerated. And even this very god hyped up Babitti's minions even more. And, well, also Gohan in his own way. Although in his case, he gets hyped for other reasons. As I already explained in the previous edition, in this series, when a character is powerful or dangerous, somehow we notice it quite easily. However, the reverse also occurs. When a character doesn't meet the circumstances or won't do anything relevant, it's quite noticeable. In Dragon Ball, predicting in this regard has always been quite easy. On the other hand, the character we're going to talk about today, Master Turtle Muten Roshi, completely broke with this stereotype during the multiversal tournament of power in Dragon Ball Super. That's mainly in the manga version, since even though it's true that he had a great role in the anime, his participation was amazing, surprising, and very emotional, along with his eternal students, Kuririn and Goku. In the manga, we got to enjoy probably the wildest feat that a Dragon Ball character has ever accomplished. And if not the wildest, it at least makes the top 5. And that was being able to at least put up a minimal fight against the greatest monster we had seen up to that point. Not counting deities, the terrifying Jiren the Grey. This, in addition, was accompanied by what, in Master Roshi's own words, was going to be the final lesson for his student Goku. He managed to make this scene have it all and showed that he was the original, most powerful man on the face of the earth. The one who fought alongside his companion and his original master against the demon Piccolo Daimao. And years later, he gave his life facing this same enemy. And he was still standing to protect his people. Then we get into whether this made sense or not. I want to say something, and it's that I feel like for some time now, the power scale in Dragon Ball has been completely broken. The characters became so absurdly powerful that it's incomprehensible how they don't obliterate the universe with a single action. That's why I think the Dragon Ball team has chosen not to make them look so strong, even though they are. Do you get what I mean? In Dragon Ball Z, when Goku reached Phase 3, he seemed like an insanely overpowered, monstrous being. Just by looking at him, you felt like he could wipe out the whole universe with a single blow. In contrast, the Super Saiyan 3 Goku from Z would be insignificant on Super's power scale. Sometimes, the characters don't seem incredibly strong. This was an instance of that. No matter how much Roshi masters this or that technique, Jiren is a guy who could wipe the floor with any enemy or rival we've seen so far in the series. Again, not counting the gods. Anyway, it was just a little surprise. Really, this wasn't going to defeat Jiren, but it did help Goku understand better how to beat him. No one expected anything from this old, crafty pervert. And yet, he still managed to leave us all speechless. This was the hottest topic of conversation in the community for the entire month when this episode aired, some time ago. That's why, for me, for having pulled off one of the craziest and sickest feats I've ever seen a character do. Considering that a simple trained human was able to dodge a few punches from that guy, right? Superman fused with Goku and the Cumbia alien deserves at least a spot on this list. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and follow me on social media like Twitter and Twitch, where I stream nearly daily. Also, don't forget to follow me on my secondary channel, Belsatilter, where I upload videos reacting to anime or reading manga that I've watched or read live. Thank you, and see you next time.